Hi, I'm Ciaran Thapar, and this is Safe, a conversation about violence affecting young people with adults who are trying to stop it. For this episode, we're doing things differently. At the Youth Endowment Fund, it's important for us to listen to those with direct experiences of violence in order to understand why it happens and find what works to prevent it. To do this honestly and safely, we're hosting a mini-series of audio-only anonymous conversations. These episodes are called Safe to Talk. To get started, I'll be sitting down with a young man who has a remarkable, tragic but triumphant story of facing systemic failure, overcoming criminal exploitation, and turning his experiences into a powerful solution. This conversation is heavy with sensitive themes, so please listen with care. You're 22 now, but how did you keep safe when you were a child?
In my earlier years, before the age of 10, keeping safe was really easy for me. I was very close to my family, had a lot of good role models in my life, and I was able to rely on a lot of people to ensure my safety. But I guess things went quite wrong for me from probably about 10 to 11 years old onwards, I'd say.
Okay, so before that, you felt like you had a happy childhood?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think the house could be slightly chaotic at points before then. I've got a brother that has got SEND needs, so he could make the house quite noisy, quite vibrant at points, certainly. But I always felt incredibly safe. Yeah, definitely. Very close to my mum. Had a really good relationship with my grandparents growing up. I was able to go around theirs for dinner and stuff like that, and had a good family bond.
That obviously changed at a certain point, like you just referred to. And it struck me that in your story, that change happened in the transition between primary and secondary school as well, right? Or around then. Talk me through kind of that time in your life. What happened?
Yeah. Where I came from, we still had a 3-tier school system. So primary school, middle school, upper school. During middle school, things were really well. Things were great. I had a lot of good friends, but unfortunately, my dad's health was starting to really deteriorate. My brother's behavioural issues were starting to become a lot more apparent. So I finished my middle school in year 8, transitioning into year 9. And for me, that's where things really went wrong. Quite early on into starting secondary school, Dad got diagnosed with cancer. And I think there was a lot of emotions. And it's interesting that we're using the word safe, because my family was my safety blanket. And the second that risk and that threat was posed to my dad, that safety blanket had disappeared. And unfortunately, at that exact moment, in the space of weeks, I'd met some new friends that were in year 11, in sixth form. So they were quite a lot older than me, because I was probably about 12 years old at this point. And I'd already started smoking and vaping and kind of misbehaving to a small degree, going out into the community a lot more, engaging with people that I wouldn't typically engage with. And then the second that I'd met these year 11s and sixth formers, that's when they're starting to introduce me to smoking weed, drinking on the weekends, hanging around in the town centre, and actually meeting some pretty unsavoury people. And what I mean by unsavoury was the fact that they were all so much older than me and really heavily involved in crime and mainly drugs. So lots of street fights, lots of staying out late, lots of drinking, and lots of drug use. And then unfortunately, that's when I'd say that I started being involved in some really unsafe behaviours, such as drug supply. So I started off smoking a bit of cannabis, drinking with these mates on the weekends. And before I knew it, they said to me, you never pay for any of this. You chill with us all week. You drink with us on the weekends, but you don't pay. And instantly my mind's gone to, well, actually, Dad's really ill. My granddad had just also been diagnosed with terminal cancer. So Mum was really stressed looking after both of them. And I thought, well, I can't go back to them and ask them for money. And luckily, I'd managed to kind of say that to these newfound friends. And before I knew it, they were saying, okay, don't worry about paying for anything. What you can do is you can bike 10 minutes in that direction go and drop off one of these small little packages and come back, give us the money, and everything stays the same. Now, recently I found out that I've got ADHD, but it explains a lot for me. But I was always this people pleaser. I never prioritised myself. I always loved being that yes man. You want me to do that? Sure, I'll go and do that. No problem whatsoever. And now that I've learned a little bit more about my ADHD as well, it all kind of makes a lot more sense why I was so willing to go down that direction and follow those orders so clearly. So, yeah.
It's a lot to happen at such a young age. Like 12 is, I wouldn't wish that upon anyone, but 12 is really young. Why do you think it is that is such a tender age for a lot of this type of exploitation to start happening?
So unfortunately, I do think actually, if anything, it's getting younger now. I think the transition between primary and secondary school is where a lot of behaviours then start occurring. People are being introduced to new people, and to throw all of that into the mix and then also have hormones on top of that and becoming a teenager and not understanding risk either. You almost have this sense of you're invincible at that age, right? That you're allowed to experiment with things, that you're allowed to do different things. So I think it is mainly down to those younger years being mixed with your older years, all being put into one place, and you're almost networking with good and bad people, and you're left to your own devices, whether you're going to make those right choices or not.
And it also, as you've pointed out, your descent into that lifestyle and being exploited and influenced by older people was made easier by the fact that your home circumstances abruptly changed through, just real bad luck, like poor health. There's obviously, it really speaks to how chance occurrence can derail a lot of young people's trajectories quite early on. The fact that a lot of people might be suffering because of decisions being made in their home by people who are meant to be their parent or carers. In that instance, it really strikes me as like extreme bad luck. And the fact that poor health can hit any family, I think it really speaks to how this stuff can happen to anyone, right?
Certainly. Exactly. And that is what a lot of my work is to do with now, making awareness, because you're spot on there. This can simply happen to anyone. And that's what I find so alarming about exploitation. Sometimes, it does just come down to chance, bad luck. And unfortunately, for me, there were almost like pivotal points in my early years from that age of 12 where things kept going wrong. So every October, something awful would happen, like a family member would get diagnosed with an illness, or a situation would occur with my brother, or Christmas time as well was another one. So I then started to tell myself, it's that time of year again where everything goes wrong. And I actually then started to have this idea that, and this expectation that it would hit a certain time of year and I would get extreme bad luck. That has definitely impacted quite a lot of my decisions as well.
So our Youth Endowment Fund's data has found recently that 1 in 9, so 12% of 13 to 17-year-olds in England and Wales say that they have been approached to either sell drugs, transport drugs, or to store weapons, drugs, or money, which goes to show how prevalent this is as an issue, that the kind of behaviours that you were being dragged into at that age is deceptively happening quite all over the country. Why do you think it happens?
Lack of opportunities, lack of purpose, lack of belonging, I think is the biggest issue why people are actually accepting some of those opportunities that occur. I think that's down to some of the biggest issues, but also I think it is just because there is so much money involved in drug supplies and organised crime groups is the biggest issue. Something that I always put to a lot of people is, if you've got no food on the table, you've got no heating at home, and you're approached by someone saying, okay, if you do this for me, you can have 20 quid. Are you going to say no? And that's the real biggest issue, why this has become what it is. People have got needs that are not being met. When you look at my story and when you look at my background, well, my needs were that I needed people. I needed friendship. I needed that sense of belonging. I needed a purpose. And I also responded incredibly well to clear instructions. I didn't find anything in my life clear. Like when I'd go to school, I'm dyslexic. I'd really struggle. The instructions I were being given were too complicated. When I looked at my family situation, I think, well, there's no simple solution here. It would make me overstimulated. It would make me dysregulated. And then all of a sudden, I've got these friends that are saying, bike 10 minutes that direction, meet one person, come back, give me the money, done. Really simple, clear instructions. They just fit so well with a neurodiverse person, and the link between exploitation and neurodiverse tendencies is phenomenal. And that's how we've got to think of it. If you're being given these clear instructions and they appeal to your neurodiversity tendencies, then you're gonna get that buzz, you're gonna get that dopamine, you're gonna get that hit from feeling important almost.
Yeah. So at that time, you're being dragged into this kind of behavior by these older people. Your lifestyle changes quite quickly across those few years, and surely that is the exact moment where services that should exist should catch that. So what were there any sort of moments of missed opportunity there?
Yeah, there really was a huge amount of missed opportunities, but I'll just break it down quite simply, hopefully. But from the age of 12, 13, in the space of 6 months, my appearance changed rapidly. I looked completely different. The way that I was presenting was completely different. My vocabulary was completely different. My perception of what's right and what's wrong, completely thrown out of the window. And I was using quite a lot of drugs as well. So I was coming into school sometimes high on drugs. Teachers would pick that up. They wouldn't really do a great deal about it. They would just search me, they'd just punish me. That would be their protocol. And then it led to, unfortunately, me being arrested on 2 separate occasions in school itself. Now, that was when I was 14 years old, so a little bit of time had gone by, but nobody ever asked me, where are these drugs coming from? I actually sat there on the day that I first ever got arrested, because I know it sounds really naive, but I didn't have any understanding of the law or different class drugs, or I didn't even really understand that you could get arrested for doing what I was doing. So when the police officers that came in, found the drugs I've been in possession of and have arrested me for that offence, I told them everything. I was the biggest snitch going, right? I told them where we were getting the drugs from, what time we got them, who we had to give the money to, where the trap houses were, where the drugs were being supplied. I completely crumbled. And the response I was met with was, you have made your bed, you need to lie in it. I remember me and my mum, we were sitting in the head teacher's office after I was released out of custody. And he was just shouting at both of us, and we're both just sitting there crying, just saying we don't know what to do. And I remember him specifically saying to me and my mum, he goes, you have got a weak son. You've got a son that isn't able to make good decisions. Your son will amount to absolutely nothing. So I thought, from that point, well, speaking up hasn't got me anywhere here. By risking myself, my safety, I've achieved nothing. And that was a really heavy blow for me. Now, I did also then start seeking help off my own back for my cannabis use.
Oh, sorry, what age are you at this point?
Still about 14 years old.
Okay.
So once I understood that cannabis was a Class B drug, once I understood that it was a criminal offence, and once I started being put into trap houses and watching people inject heroin and smoke crack cocaine and, really chaotic environments, I started to realise, okay, I'm involved in stuff here that I haven't got a great deal of control over. I remember they used to beat people up in front of me, and they'd say, look, if you talk, this will be you. Or if any money ever went missing, or if I ever got robbed, they'd beat someone up, or they'd almost torture them in front of me and say, look, you go out there, you sort that mess out, otherwise that will be you. So I realised that I needed to stop smoking cannabis. I needed to seek help for that, and then hopefully I'd be in a better position to try and leave that life behind. But then the problem was, I'd speak to my drug worker and I'd speak to my youth worker, but there was a real language barrier. Even with the drug expert, I'd say to them phrases like white and bee, or, snowballing, or stuff like that. And even the drug expert would sit there and go, what is that? What are you talking about here? And I would go, oh yeah, sorry, I'm talking about crack cocaine, I'm talking about heroin. So then again, I try opening up, but there'd be that language barrier, that lack of understanding. I also remember no one ever used the word victim to me. I was a criminal, is what they labelled me as. I was labelled as gang affiliated, even, 14, 15, 16, there were some really serious incidents that happened. For example, I was stabbed on 2 separate occasions. And I remember the police safeguarding team calling me up. I don't know how they got my number, but they called me up and they said, oh, we've had a report that you've been stabbed. And I said, I lied to them. I said, no, I haven't. And they said, okay, we'll just remember that you are gang affiliated. If that you have, and that you need to make a statement, or you want to report this offence or anything that's happened to you, then we will have to meet in a neutral location. And they just never made it feel very inviting to actually say, okay, that has happened or that hasn't happened. I always felt like everyone was against me apart from my own family.
There's so much going on there, and you're still only 14, 15.
Certainly.
It's unbelievable and amazing that you're sat here. Honestly, like I have to just shout out. I would have probably big you up a few times in the conversation, but the fact that you're sat here being able to recount this is really powerful. So thank you. Nearly half, so 48% of teenage children exploited into selling or transporting drugs, hiding drugs, weapon or money, had been victims of violence severe enough to need medical treatment. So that's 18 times higher than among those who had never been approached to sell drugs. So basically the correlation between people that have been approached to sell drugs and take part in criminal behaviour like that are far more likely to be entangled in violence. That might be obvious, but I suppose just if we can maybe unpack that from your experience a bit, like why is there that link that easily happens?
When you're meeting drug users that have that need of wanting that drug, that substance that you've got in your possession, they are willing to do anything to get that substance. So something that would quite often happen when I was involved in the county line, but you'd be standing there serving up a drug user, they'd be holding a bottle of Stella, and before you know it, they're whacking it around your head and they're stealing the drugs that are on you. But then you're going back to your exploiters, you're saying, I've been robbed, they've stolen the drugs, the money, whatever it might be. And quite often that exploiter will quite literally hand you a weapon and say, well, next time someone does that to them, you poke them, you stab them, you get them back essentially. And that is a mindset that is constantly drilled into you. The other problem that you've got with violence and drug supply and county lines is weapons are so normalised. You walk into a trap house, you've got machetes by the front door. I remember quite often a weapon that was really frequently used was you'd get a wooden baseball bat and you'd get loads of nails and you'd hammer the nails through the baseball bat so that if anyone walked through the door that's going around someone's head, was of course an incredibly violent weapon to the normal person. But if you're 13 years old and you're sitting in a room with weapons everywhere, well, you think, oh, well, that's normal, right? Again, without going off on a tangent, I remember watching so many people take drugs so often that I would go home and actually think my mum and dad are the not normal people for not taking drugs. I honestly used to think that my mum and dad must have a machete hidden under their bed, or maybe when I go to sleep at night, they must inject heroin, because everything else was so normalized that wasn't normal. So it's all about how your perception has changed and what you're encouraged to do, what you're coerced to do. And that's why violence goes so hand in hand.
Around that time when you've been kicked out of school, you're obviously involved in the patterns of behaviour that you just explained. You started attending a pupil referral unit.
Yes, that's correct.
And I guess this is another shift in your life, like in terms of the institutions that you're attached to and you're attending. So just talk me through that. What happened next?
Yeah. So I mean, the pupil referral unit as a whole was a very chaotic and interesting place. But even before that, so the EWO, the Educational Welfare Officer, I remember my first day about to go into the pupil referral unit, and I remember she turned around to me and she goes, "I hope you're ready for this. You're about to get eaten alive in this place, right?" Right?
What?
Yeah, me and my mum's heart just absolutely dropped. I think I started crying, to be honest with you. I was so nervous. And I walked into that place, and to be honest with you, I thought, okay, she's right, because the chaos was absolutely insane. And actually, unfortunately, in my pupil referral unit I attended, the violence in that place was really, really high as well. I remember my first couple of days actually witnessing a teacher get a plank of wood whacked round their head and they got knocked out clean, broken eye socket. And we wasn't, the young people that attended that service, we wasn't all being criminally exploited, but we'd all came from very tricky background situations. So why the violence was so high there. But we also got a taxi to school every single day. Now, I was incredibly unlucky that my taxi driver I had was a huge cocaine user. So he would pick me up in the mornings. He would be absolutely off his head on cocaine, visibly off his head, chain smoking, non-stop. We'd get to school some days and I think, thank God I've made it. But then you're getting out of this taxi from one crazy environment straight into another, right? Because in these alternative provisions and pupil referral units, you've got probably about a 5 metre radius where you've got a locked door each side of that 5 metre radius on a corridor. So it's locked door, locked door, locked door. They call it the pupil referral unit to prison pipeline because there's so many young people that attend pupil referral unit and in prison. And the reason why I think that is because they're set up the exact same as a prison. The fences are really high. All the doors are locked. Very, very similar to that sort of environment. So yeah, chaotic is an understatement, and that taxi driver wouldn't always drop me off at school, or he wouldn't always drop me off at home, drop me off in trap houses, or he would even go and pick up drugs while I was still in the taxi. And yeah, he was definitely a bit of a job's worth, I think is the right word to describe him.
I think that's a polite way of describing him, yeah, to be honest. So this is another instance of extreme bad luck.
For sure.
Your whole story is littered with these moments of incidents, people's behaviour around you that is completely out of your control. And it's just such a potent example of how so many young people get dragged into this.
For sure.
That lack of control, like, what could you have done? What are you meant to do? This is someone that's meant to be safely dropping you off in this place, right? And you're obviously being let down in the way you've been spoken to by different people within the education system, and presumably other, police, other services as well. So I just think that, yeah, it really goes to show how many different forces can be against a lot of teenagers when they are being dragged into this.
Definitely. And for anybody that's listening to this, they might be thinking, okay, well, like you said, this is a lot of bad luck. This is a rare example, right? But I sit here today feeling so privileged, so lucky to be able to sit here and tell this story. Because unfortunately, again, during that time period, probably 15, 16, a lot of my friends were going to prison. I had a couple of friends pass away as well. So, yeah, I think I'm lucky now to be able to sit here and tell my story. But for my friends that went to prison and a friend that passed away and even different people I attended that pupil referral unit with, their bad luck hasn't ended yet. They're still very much involved in that because they were repeatedly let down. We all have very similar taxi drivers. We all worked with very similar professionals, and a lot of those young people that attended that school are now heavily abusing drugs, or they're serving long prison sentences,
Right.
or they've been in and out of custody. So I'm very privileged to be able to sit here and tell my story.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad that you're here, able to tell it as well, and to be able to listen to it. I feel like that's a good moment maybe to shift into thinking about how things changed for the better.
Yeah.
So what was the moment at which, you look back and you're like, that was the turning point?
This is always almost my favourite part of my story. But when I was 16, I was coerced into handling quite a large quantity of drugs. I was arrested for a very serious offence, actually, and I was looking at a minimum of about 5-year prison sentence, give or take, and it was looking very likely that I would be serving that custodial sentence. And I remember I met with my youth worker, my youth justice practitioner, after being released from custody, and I sat there and I told him a lot of what had happened. Don't get me wrong, we still had that language barrier. And I remember he sat there with me and my mum. He looked at me and my mum and he went, I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know how to help you, but I'm going to sit here and pray with you. Me and my mum aren't religious, so we thought, okay, if that's the best he's got, let's go with it, right? And he prayed with us, but long story short, we thought, okay, he cares. He's got nothing else he can do right now, and the only tool that he has got is God. And yes, we don't believe in God, but if that's what he believes in, and if he thinks that can help us, we'll accept it. And believe it or not, 2 weeks later, he got back in contact and he said, I've just received an email and there's this organisation called Leaders Unlocked that are looking for people, and they want young people to take part in a Young Advocates project to do peer research on policing, youth justice, education, stereotyping, and so on. He said, look, I know it probably don't sound like your sort of thing, but if you engage with them, it will probably help your court case. So I thought, all right, great, let's give it a go, because I really didn't want to go to prison. I've always been very skinny. I've always, after suffering from a fair bit of trauma, I lost a lot of weight. So I knew I wasn't going to survive prison. So I engaged with this organisation called Leaders Unlocked. And I remember it was about 20 of us, and we were all from very similar backgrounds, nationwide project, and we'd all suffered huge amounts of trauma, but it almost worked like an AA meeting, because there was always one person in these meetings that was ahead of the rest of us. So, he might have just escaped his gang, or he might have just got a job that he really wanted, or a driving licence, whatever it might be. So that was the inspiration, that one person that was really doing well. And then we started engaging with different youth justice services. We got all the research together. And I remember we then got invited to Parliament to deliver our research and to actually publish it. And I couldn't believe it. And unfortunately, just before this, I'd suffered a chemical attack. So I'd looked horrendous. My face was all over the place. I was still heavily involved, but there's no clear transition between being exploited to not being exploited, right? So I remember...
So you kind of got 1 foot in, 1 foot out at this point.
Oh, for sure. I could not describe it better. You're 100% right there. And I remember sitting in Parliament, and I've got this messed up face. I look absolutely awful. I've got a trap phone in my pocket. I'm pretty sure I still had a couple of wraps of drugs on me. And I'm sitting there addressing these MPs, right, for sharing our research. And I left the Parliament building that day, and I thought, you sure can't make this up, right? And I continued going and engaging with Leaders Unlocked from one experience to another. And I was incredibly lucky. A couple of weeks after that, I believe we went to the Home Office again, very similar. I had a trap phone in my pocket.
In the Home Office?
Yeah, in the Home
That's
Office.
mad.
Sitting in the Home Office. I remember I had to walk through the doors to be searched, and my heart has just dropped, right? Because I'm thinking, well, I've got 2 phones on me. This can look awful. And luckily, it didn't get questioned, but I was sitting there, and they were talking about this thing called county lines and drug supply, and that you could be a victim of drug supply. I was sitting there thinking, they're describing me. Like, the case study they were asking our advice on was me to a T. A young person suffered a lot of youth violence, really heavily involved in crack cocaine and heroin supply and MDMA, cannabis, all the rest of it. And I left that day and I said to the CEO of Leaders Unlocked, I said, you know what they've just asked for our advice in there for? It's happening to me right now. When I go home tonight, I'll be sitting in a trap house doing exactly what they've just described. And I've never experienced anything like it. She didn't react like everyone else had previously reacted. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't full of emotion. She went, okay. She said, are you okay? I said, well, I'm getting through it. She said, have you got a court case at the moment? I said, yeah. I'm not going to lie. If I'm engaging with you right now, I'm looking at a 5-year prison sentence. And she went, okay, I've got this legal team. They can help you out. Just for Kids Law. She put me in contact with them. And straight away, bam, they were hot on it. Like, the solicitors I had before Just for Kids Law, they were worse than my exploiters themselves. I'll go into custody and I'd be met with this duty solicitor, and he'd go, you say anything but no comment, then you're going straight to prison. You've got to say no comment. No comment, no comment. They ask you how you are, you say no comment. And I got this new solicitor, and they were just lovely. Just for Kids Law. They wanted to hear about me. First off, they wanted to know who I was as a person. Then they sat down and asked me to tell them, my story, what no one's asked me to do. And then they brought in an expert witness called Dr. Grace Robinson, and she listened to my story up until that point, because I'm still about 16, 17 at this stage. And it was fascinating. I got to the end of telling them my story for about an hour, and they said to me, oh, well, you know where you were stabbed and robbed there? Well, that was debt bondage. That was your own gang that stopped you, robbed you, and tricked you into being in a debt. You know, when you started upper school, well, that was peer-on-peer grooming. And basically, they were able to pinpoint every single position where things had gone wrong, where I'd been failed, where I'd been let down. And I remember they both sat there, looked me dead in the eyes, and they went, you realise you're a victim, right? And I went, nah, you're kidding me. I said, I'm scum. I'm scum of the earth. I've watched people overdose on heroin. I've served people drugs. I've taken advantage of the most vulnerable people. I am scum. I deserve to go to prison. I said, nah, you're a victim. And I remember they both gave me a hug. And it was a very emotional hug, actually, because it was so sincere. And don't get me wrong, I didn't walk out that day thinking I'm a victim, but the foundations were laid. And from that day onwards, my mum and my dad were sitting there every waking night looking up, well, what is county lines? What is criminal exploitation? Can you be a victim of drug dealing? And for the first time ever, I had my family on board as well. So what I'm now describing here is I've all of a sudden gone from being the kid that's heard that he's going to prison for 5 years, sitting there with my youth worker that's praying with me because he's got no other options, right? To now being introduced to this organisation called Leaders Unlocked, getting this incredible legal team, being introduced to an expert witness, and then them putting me in for an NRM, and they were able to educate my family on what was going on.
And give you a language to talk about what you've now got a language to I think sometimes language is so powerful, right? Like, you've now got these terms, even just the power of saying the word victim. You can flip the whole script at that point because you've got the language to talk about it.
For sure, exactly that. For the first time ever, I felt that I was starting to become on the same level as these professionals, as these people that I'd always felt so alien against. It was incredible. And I know if my family was sitting here right now, they'd said the exact same thing. Like, they were able to then find out all this research and then they could support me. Because before then, unfortunately, like, my relationship between me and my dad started to break down quite a lot. He just thought I was, again, making bad choices, and yeah.
There's also a question of sort of a balance of bad luck and also agency. So you were making maybe some bad choices, right?
Yeah,
like that's
sure.
That's true as well.
100%.
But it's understanding that a lot of people faced with those same circumstances would make those bad choices because they don't necessarily have the right information, they don't have the right love in their life, that whatever it is, the institutions that should be helping them aren't helping them. I think there's always this thing of like, we have to show compassion and understand that forces are against a lot of young people, but also give them the respect of like, they have agency as well. And that's actually, I feel like that's so much of your story coming out of those years is because you also have had agency. Like, you've made some really good decisions too.
I think that is where I now class myself as so lucky, because I was able to find the right people at the right point. But if I hadn't have done so, then things would have been incredibly bad and I would have accepted my situation. And actually, I think at 16, I was at make or break. Either I turn into a hardened criminal and put on the big man persona and start matching the same energy as my exploiters, or I become this really vulnerable person and actually speak up to a lot of people. And I was lucky I was able to make that choice. But again, that was very much 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And I remember, at points coming across as quite defiant, quite angry, quite frustrated, difficult to work with to a sense as well. I think I could present as quite rude at certain stages in my life.
I don't blame you though. Like, if we show young people, teenagers, a world, or give model behavior or ways of speaking. If you're being spoken to like that when you're getting kicked out of school, you're being spoken to like that, you're being taken to your Peru by a taxi driver that's contributing towards your exploitation, etc., etc. All these different ways that adults are letting you down. I'm not surprised you're rude to them.
For sure, right? 100%. And interestingly, yeah, right, my pupil referral unit could be quite chaotic. It could be, difficult. But there were some professionals there that, because the curriculum is so much more relaxed, they were able to be more human. So I did build some good relationships there because they were able to call me mate. Just that simple phrasing. What's happening, mate? You all right? You good today? I was thinking, okay, we're mates here. I can kind of, talk to you a little bit, build up that relationship. When I think when you're being shouted at constantly, being told you're weak, you get to think, well, I am weak. All right, then, if you're telling me that I'm scum of the earth, I will be scum of the earth. It's almost that self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And that can be a huge barrier, certainly.
Yeah. So after you get support from various organisations, don't end up going to prison.
No.
Talk me through what happened next, but I guess also speaking directly to your efforts to come up with a solution for supporting other young people since then.
Yeah, certainly. So it was really interesting. Like I said, I worked with many different organisations, all third sector, Youth Endowment Fund actually being one of them, having that exposure, being able to be in the same rooms of really high profile professionals, being able to learn from them, but also being able to have my perspective. I thought, actually, I'm in a really unique position here. There were some transferable skills I learned from being exploited and being part of a county line. And one of them, for example, was that I am really good at talking to people from all walks of life. Like, I'm very good at talking to MPs, but I'm also really good at talking to people that are still on road. I still understand all of the vocabulary that, your typical person that's supplying drugs uses. So I thought, okay, what can I do with all of this information? How can it benefit people? And then I thought, well, actually, when I look back at my story, where were my biggest barriers? Lack of education. The fact that I didn't understand drug laws, or any laws, actually. I didn't understand that you could be strip searched at 14 years old or put in handcuffs or any of that sort of stuff. So I thought, let's try and make something here. And with the support of Leaders Unlocked, I was able to create a project. What goes into schools, services, parent workshops, actually at this point, anybody that will listen, to educate them on all topics, county lines, criminal exploitation. We touch a little bit on sexual exploitation, debt bondage, peer-on-peer grooming, gangs, youth violence, weapons, the full shebang. And we go in, we speak to these young people, we educate them on everything that I feel they should know to keep themselves safe in the community. And I think we've hit about 10,000 young people that I've spoken to. I'm really proud about. But unfortunately, there's always a but, right? Since doing that work, I've now identified that nearly every single school I go into, a young person will approach me at the end of the workshop or the end of assembly and go, no, but you've just spoken about there. That's happening to me right now. Or that's happening to my mate. Or my brother's involved in that. Or my cousin. Or every session. What is just absolutely heartbreaking. So now what I'm really trying to do is make more awareness. Make sure all the professionals have the right information to be able to swoop in, and the long-term plan will be to mentor these young people to be able to follow in similar footsteps to myself. But yeah, I'd say I'm on a bit of a mission at the moment to try and tackle criminal exploitation head on, and where I think we could really make a difference is actually by making employment more accessible at younger age. It's a very controversial topic, to be honest, and I understand why the laws are in place for allowing young people to work at certain ages, but that's my biggest mission is because the reason why we're seeing so many young people being criminally exploited now is because they need money. We live in a world where everything comes down to money, and we're saying to them now, can't work until you're 16 years old. You can't get legitimate income until you're 16. So I'm really passionate about trying to make those opportunities, those legitimate, safe employment streams. So yeah.
What might that look like?
Yeah, certainly. So I would love to see more young people being entrepreneurs, right? Setting up their own little enterprises, their own little mini businesses. I'm not a massive fan of social media, but I always think it's a good example. We live in 2025, where personally, I don't think it's ever really been easier to make money. I think a lot of people have multiple streams of income these days, and we're not equipping our young people to be the next AI makers or social media producers or anything like that. So that's what I would really like to see, or even just on the simpler side of things, creating those little businesses such as car washes or so on, because all of my so-called friends that I grew up with, I can guarantee you, if they was not criminally exploited, they would be mega entrepreneurs right now. I've got a friend that's serving 22 years in prison. He got sentenced when he was 16 years old. And I guarantee you, if he was not sitting in prison right now, mega entrepreneur. And it all because he wasn't allowed to work at an earlier age. Nobody was there to help him start up his own enterprise. And if somebody could have swooped in there and said, look, well, let's start up a market stall or an online shop or a little TikTok shop or whatever it might be, he would be incredible right now. And that breaks my heart. So I don't know exactly what it looks like, but along those sort of lines. Yeah.
You're getting there though.
I hope so.
Gradually.
I truly do. Yeah. Finger crossed, eh?
Yeah. Just to kind of close this amazing conversation, which I'm so grateful for and humbled by as well. What someone listening to this, they're still with us. What's the sort of we Youth Endowment Fund, we work with lots of people working in policy or across different sectors, from education to youth justice to children's services to, you name it. There's lots of people listening to this conversation, hopefully, that can actually make a difference. What's your kind of last message to them, or even to the average person that stumbled upon this conversation and just wants to learn?
Yeah, certainly. So we need to stop criminalising young people. We need to see young people that are being criminally exploited as victims, not label them as the next Pablo Escobar would be a great start for me, and provide better opportunities. No matter who you are, what your background is, can you engage with a local young person? Can you engage with your local neighbour? Can you provide them some sort of opportunity? If it's not through sport or some sort of hobby, is it through employment or anything like that? And I would love to see more apprenticeships widely available. I think apprenticeships are really the answer. A lot of the young people that are being criminally exploited, they haven't got the academic ability. So if you can engage with a young person, provide them with some sort of opportunity, provide them with hope, and work with their families, then please do.
Thank you.
No, it's been my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
If you'd like to find out more about how to keep young people safe from violence, hit the link in the description.